Hello, I'm Renée Fleming. I'm delighted to be joined today by my good friend, Dr. Francis Collins, Director of the National Institutes of Health. Dr. Collins is the only presidentially appointed NIH director to serve in 3 administrations and oversees the work of the largest supporter of biomedical research in the world. He's also noted for his landmark discoveries of disease genes and his leadership of the International Human Genome Project. For the last few years, Francis and I have spearheaded Sound Health, a partnership between the NIH, the Kennedy Center, and the National Endowment for the Arts. Now, many of you may have already heard how this began, a chance dinner party in Washington with 3 Supreme Court justices. And a lot has happened in the few years since. After Francis and I spoke at last year's Aspen Ideas, Health 2020, about the science of the arts, we wanted to explore today what the road ahead looks like for the arts and health, including some very exciting recent developments. So Francis, with the initial investment from recent NIH grants for music and health research, a true research community is being forged. Can you talk about what this means?
Yes, I would love to. And Renee, it's great to join this session with you for Aspen and to have a chance to talk about what's happened in the course of the last year, COVID notwithstanding. One of the things that I found so enlivening about this opportunity to work with you on Sound Health is how it inspired a lot of the scientific staff around me to join up. So we have no less than 23 of our institutes that have staff engaged in a trans-NIH working group on Sound Health, really coming up with creative ideas about how we could, using this research engine called NIH, the largest one in the world, come up with additional insights into how, in fact, music intersects with what we're learning about neuroscience and how we could use that information to further enhance the ways that music can be used as a healing effort for people who are struggling with various challenges. So we have now, after a lot of thought about how best to do this, funded no less than $20 million worth of research in this area and brought together 15 investigators. And we just had our first meeting of all of them where they could talk to each other about what they're doing. That's pretty amazing. Some of these are fairly basic studies looking at music and how it affects early development of the brain. Some of them are more on the neuroscience, trying to understand how musical sounds are interpreted in the auditory cortex and how that translates into emotional impact that we can all remember having the experience of, or for some of us, it seems to happen a lot. And then especially research that's looking at music and how it can be applied for healing, how it is that we could utilize music to help somebody who's struggling with PTSD. Or how we could use rhythm to help in the case of Parkinson's disease, where that rhythm may help somebody overcome what is otherwise a motor difficulty. Those 15 investigators all presented what they were up to, and it was inspiring to see. And you could also see the way in which the interactions between these folks, many of whom didn't really work together before, are going to make the whole even greater than the sum of the parts. So we're on a roll here, putting together such a program, and this is just the beginning.
Yes, I was so thrilled to hear at least a little bit, these short presentations on all of the work that they're doing. Very
Indeed.
Exciting work. Schizophrenia, for instance, that, to begin to understand how this recognition of reality can be perhaps strengthened through songwriting in a group.
Isn't that an amazing
ideas.
example? Absolutely. We're also excited, Renee, to be developing, though, a toolkit for music-based interventions for researchers who are studying disorders of aging and how music can help with that. And your foundation has been very important to our putting together this kind of a plan. What we'd like to do is to provide through this toolkit a clear sense of what researchers would want to be doing as far as design of studies, so that we could learn as much as possible in a rigorous way about what works and what doesn't work in terms of offering musical interventions to people who have disorders of aging. So yeah, say something about this one, because your foundation has gotten very engaged with the Foundation for NIH in making this happen.
Well, I'm so thrilled that the Renée Fleming Foundation can partner on this toolkit with the NIH and the FNIH. So looking to build out the evidence base for music and health interventions is so important when we think about what we could achieve nationwide with the right body of research. And creating the toolkit, I think it was something that I understood from the beginning was something necessary, because the nature of research is so important. And if it's not condoned by the NIH, then it's almost as if it doesn't really have the possibility for having a great impact. In a sense. And we know that there's a ton of research out there that's been done for decades. And so we want to build on that and shore it up. And behavioral science and statistics can be drawn on for figuring out exactly how the toolkit can develop common guidelines. So people would be able to go to the NIH and say, oh, not only has someone already done this, which is also important because people weren't speaking to each other early on in research quarters, but how could we do it so that it is really successful? And investigators can build on each other's data efficiently. And then, of course, I love the fact that it all ends with the NIH saying, yes, we validate this, we're going to continue to fund it, and that enables us to really begin to think about how we can provide it on a large scale and how we can fund it for people through insurance, et cetera. Yes. So your new body of research is going to contribute hugely to arts and health, isn't it?
That's the idea, that we're really going to try to assist with the evolution of this field into a new space here, where we're going to encourage clear thoughtfulness about design of studies, because while there's a great deal of exciting information coming out of music therapy approaches to various conditions, a lot of it still does seem to be more on the anecdotal side than it does on the side of a rigorous, well-designed study that could then be replicated to be sure that it works. And that's, I think, where the field now needs to go. So through this toolkit, figuring out what kind of designs make the most sense, what are the metrics that you use to assess response? What are the investigators and their disciplinary expertise that you ought to have involved in order to be sure that the study is going to give a result that you can be quite confident in? Even what do you use for common data elements, something that we talk about a lot in other areas of medical research, so that you can compare studies across different investigators and different kinds of applications and see actually what was similar and what was different. If you didn't measure the same things or call them the same particular elements, then it's pretty hard to do that comparison. We've got the chance, because this field now is just bursting with potential, to be sure that we align it with all of these principles about good design so that we can learn as much as possible. Now, some people might think that sounds a little heavy-handed, like you're going to constrain things. Not at all. We want people to unleash all of the most creative ideas they can come up with, but do so in a framework where we'll understand what happened and how to build on that.
It's really the understanding of the brain that's allowed this to happen, the explosion of technology with fMRI, EEG, and people are talking about biomarkers all the time now. So when I first became introduced to this field of research, I heard soft science mentioned all the time from doctors and various people. Can you speak to that? So what is making this into less of a soft science, shall we say?
Very good point you're making, because I think that has been a criticism oftentimes in the past. It didn't seem as if it was based upon the sort of rigorous scientific evidence or understanding mechanisms. We are at this remarkable moment in neuroscience where the Brain Initiative, which has now been supported by NIH for 6 years and is going to continue in a very exciting way, is really figuring out some fundamentals about how those circuits that involve those 86 billion neurons between your ears do what they do. We're going to really understand how you process auditory information and why it is that music goes to a slightly different part of the auditory cortex than sounds like spoken language, and what that means, and how does that connect then with other aspects of who you are, especially emotional responses, which we know can be very powerful. Gosh, yeah, it's just recently been Easter morning, and Renee, I was, of course, not able to go to church because nobody can go to church. It's not safe yet. And I'm sitting listening to church service on my laptop, and they sang that wonderful opening hymn, Christ the Lord is risen today. And they got to the last verse, and there was a descant. And descants just do me in every time. And I had got chills. I got this sense of being sort of lifted out of myself. I realized that I had tears were streaming down my face. I didn't expect that to happen. And that was because of the power of that music to touch my very soul. Now, that kind of power is something we're increasingly able to understand through the tools of neuroscience. And some people might say, oh, you're taking the awe away from it. No, 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 no. We're adding awe to it by having the ability to understand the amazing ways that brains can do these things and how we can use those to help people who are suffering. This is really an exciting moment for sure.
That's so wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. I mean, imagine being able to harness that emotional power. And many of us, I mean, I started, my interest in this really began with this recognition that the mind-body connection was so crucial for my ability as a singer to become a great singer, and certainly for my ability to communicate with the audience. And there's no question that that affects, if we can affect the body in that respect with involuntary muscles that create a virtuosic style of singing, we can do it with various health outcomes. So there are other exciting recently launched initiatives that I wanted to talk about too, because there's an explosion of interest in the sector, and not just, from the public as well, which is probably driving it. But the NEA, one of our partners, has funded the Sound Health Network, and UCSF, which has been a magnet for arts-related funding in health, was chosen actually to create this clearinghouse as a resource center and a network. So this is a way for all different researchers to connect with each other, and for the body as a whole to connect with the public, which is so fabulous. It's just starting up. It's a great group of people and real scientists that we admire. And then there's the NeuroArts Blueprint initiative. So Ruth Katz and Susan Magsamen. Ruth Katz is, of course, from the Aspen Institute, and Susan Magsamen from Johns Hopkins are starting this new scientific field of inquiry, art, health, well-being, and humanities. And the idea is to create a field, which is a much larger than an initiative, a conference. It's something that's considered to be off to the side. When you think about creating a field, it's about something that has real strength underneath it, a foundation, and it joins some of the other great fields. Climate science was not a field just a few decades ago. So that's an example. So it's broader than music. It can establish and promote wellness across the humanities, architecture, the study of beauty. NeuroArts is, of course, about how we as human beings engage with artistic elements from top to bottom. So how do results from research impact society as a whole? And what does this mean for how we design arts in health research?
Well, that's what we'd love to know the answer to, isn't it? And I kind of think that we have an intermediate step in between these very specific studies that are being conducted by researchers, often on a subset of individuals with a particular condition. So you might have a study that involved a few dozen people, but ultimately you want to know, how does this affect larger groups? And in this area, I imagine we have an opportunity that can be invested in, and that is to look at some of these large-scale cohorts that NIH has been supporting, some of them for a long time, like the Framingham study, some of them more recently, like the program called All of Us, which aims to enroll 1 million Americans, and we're already up to almost 400,000. Those folks are our partners. They're very diverse. They are willing to share information about themselves, their electronic records. They have their DNA analyzed. And they're very interested in taking part in various kinds of additional studies. So if we come up with ways that we think, based on research, are likely to be beneficial, either for keeping people healthy or for dealing with some chronic challenge of an illness, here's a place to do that. I also got to mention, we have a study that's ongoing right now that enrolls 9 or 10-year-olds. So it's called ABCD, the Adolescent Brain Cognitive Development, and tracks them over the course of 8 years to see what is happening during that very critical time period between childhood and adolescence and adulthood. And this is another place where I think we'd have a great opportunity to see how various musical interventions might help for those that are struggling with a particular issue or who are just trying to stay healthy. So all of those are the kinds of experimental opportunities that we should be thinking about as we take our insights forward.
Perfect. Yes. And there's a great example of this in arts and health. EpiArts Lab at University of Florida, led by Jill Sonke, and NEA research lab collaboration between academia and government, philanthropy, and including Bloomberg, and international partners, including the University College at London. So this lab runs 20 large-scale studies exploring impacts of arts engagement on mental health, social isolation, chronic disease, and other health outcomes. So this is a really large umbrella and a broad way of thinking about this. And I know that the University of Florida with Jill have been leading the field for some time now. So it's very exciting.
That is. So, Renée, you're somebody who also is a citizen, not just of the United States arena, but the whole world, because you travel extensively, you have so many contacts. Talk about some of the barriers or opportunities that you've seen in terms of considering the arts as an option for health and well-being, maybe in other parts of the world.
Well, certainly I've had the chance to bring presentations on music and the mind, which was one of our first convenings. That was the title of it. And I think you coined that title, actually, Francis. And then I had a webinar this last summer called Music and Mind Live. So I have a really strong sense of what the public cares about, what the public is interested in, certainly the music concert attending public. And that they are all in. They're fascinated. They want to know how this can be helpful to them. They want more information. It surprises me how much is not known, what therapies are not understood, or and the fact that people don't realize these are available to them. So that's one of the barriers, is really just messaging. One of the other great things, though, that I found is certain arts organizations now, as a result, are pairing with community healthcare providers. And this is fostering collaboration across the boards. And for instance, I witnessed at the LA Opera at a luncheon, bringing all of their health partners together, sitting at a table, not knowing that Cal State at Northridge has a top drawer music therapy program. They have training, local rehabilitation. And so I watched these groups say, wait, do you mean we could have this in our hospital? We could have this where we're treating young people with mental health issues? I mean, this type of networking is possible with social prescribing, and it's very exciting to see what these options could be. And I think, the barriers really have to do with our over-reliance on drugs in a one-size-fits-all protocol and profits. And we're beginning to understand, certainly insofar as our government is funding healthcare, that the government, it's too expensive to pay for all of this, when especially these low-cost, non-invasive treatments could really bring down healthcare costs over time. And social prescribing, of course, requires buy-in from physicians, healthcare organizations, governments, and communities. And the opportunities are, besides being cost-effective, there's rigorous qualitative research, which of course you're providing and funding, community input, and then this whole notion of integrative whole person health. So the UK and Massachusetts are both funding social prescription initiatives. They have them in develop. So UK will have this fully prescribable by 2023. And I had just learned that Massachusetts is starting a similar program because their 40% of their budget is healthcare. So this could include all kinds of group lessons, playlists, dance classes. I mean, what you can do with Parkinson's with dance, for instance, this bypassing of the part of the brain that causes us to shuffle and stop and stutter in Parkinson's is made fluid with music and rhythm and movement. So these kinds of initiatives should be available to everyone. And the shift towards preventative health care is a model for what we can really try and do in the U.S., don't you think?
Absolutely. I mean, in fact, maybe this raises the question then about where do we draw the line in terms of what's under the umbrella of arts and health? Because we're really talking about very broad aspects of human experience, the appreciation of beauty, the whole field of aesthetics. As we try to focus in specifically on health interventions, and I've been talking about rigorous scientific strategies to do those research studies, how do we maintain, of course, this larger scale sense of the joyfulness that can come to all of us in a less organized way as a consequence of the arts and what they can do to enrich our lives? How do we deal with that part?
No, it's true. It's true. I mean, we can address some of this broadly, of course. This is what the NeuroArts Blueprint is trying to do. But arts and science have value beyond the health benefits. And science is so much more. I think of science as entirely creative because you're asking what, how, why. You're asking larger questions of human existence, which is something that artists have always done.
Yes.
And so far as we're the muses for human experience, whether past, present, or future, science is really kind of in that creative space. And there's a reason why people like Einstein, they were violinists. I've found that this amateur musicians have belonged very much to the scientific community all along, and certainly to medicine, don't you think? Well, you are one. You're an excellent musician.
And it's not hard to find people to join my rock and roll band because the scientists are all like, yeah, call on me, please. I'm ready. I'll sing, I'll play an instrument, I'll do something. I love this stuff. Yeah, the overlap is really, really impressive. Arts and science tend to go together. And maybe
And
we
people
should.
don't realize that we have to establish a rigor of and technical foundation to what we do that
Right.
requires that 10,000 hours of practice, and there's no question that we can't skip over that part. So we have that in common as well.
That's a really good point. There's a lot of joy and there's a lot of discipline. And for the scientist, those moments of discovery are interrupted by long periods of hard work and oftentimes frustration and failure. I suspect you would say the same is true for somebody whose life is all about making music.
I sang fabulously in the practice room and in the dressing room for years before I could do it on stage. And well into my career, actually, I just thought, darn, that was so great in the dressing room. So yeah, it takes mastery besides the curiosity. You can have an idea and an innovative idea, but then it takes years to establish the proof of it. So it's I think arts and music are a good vehicle for this wider implementation of integrative medicine.
I totally agree with that. And that's why the NIH is really thrilled to be part of this. We do have a whole national center for complementary and integrative health. And this is a wonderful fit in that effort where we are trying to get away from the tendency to call everybody by their diagnosis and instead recognize we are complicated individuals that need a holistic approach. And if you're really serious about that, then you want to bring every possible capability of healing to the table. And the arts and music are certainly a powerful one. And I'm really glad we're able to do more in that space than we ever have before.
Yes, thank you so much, Francis. And I also think that this is a democratic way of looking at medicine and science because we have the potential for reaching a lot more people through this kind of artistic lens. It's something that makes people feel comfortable. Telehealth can reach more people, and this works very well. And it pairs so well with other interventions. So thank you so much. And I want to thank all of you for joining us today. But before we go, Francis and I did not think this session would be complete without a musical collaboration, which we enjoyed taping together a few weeks ago. So I take my inspiration from Francis, who manages always to keep on the sunny side of life. So the song was popularized by the Carter family in the 1920s. So another inspiration from Francis, because your father in your childhood really had you steeped in the great folk tradition of the U.S.
Oh, yes, indeed. I learned this song when I was probably 5 or 6 years old and still enjoy hearing it or singing it every chance I get.
Yeah, and it was composed in 1899, so I feel safe that I can call that classical.
Sounds good to me.
There's a dark and a troubled side of life. There's a bright and a sunny side too. Though we meet with the darkness and strife, the sunny side we also may view. Keep on the sunny side, always on the sunny side. Keep on the sunny side of life. It will help us every day. It will brighten all the way. way if we'll keep on the sunny side of life.
The storm in its fury broke today, dashing hopes that we've cherished so dear. Clouds and storm will in time pass away. The sun again will shine bright and clear.
Keep on the sunny side, always on the sunny side. Keep on the sunny side of life. It will help us every day. It will brighten all the way if we'll keep on the sunny side of life. Let us greet with the song of hope each day. Though the moments be cloudy or fair, and let us trust in your Savior always, who keepeth everyone in his care. Keep on the sunny side, always on the sunny side. Keep on the sunny side of life. It will help us every day. It will brighten all the way if we'll keep on the sunny side of life. If we'll keep on the sunny side of life.
Thank you.
Thanks, Renee. Thanks, everybody.